Before we get into this episode, a quick thank you to the brands that make Master Integrator possible. This episode is brought to you by ADI Global, formerly Snap One, your one-stop partner for professional integration. ADI brings together powerhouse brands like Control4, Arachnus, Binary and Strong, along with a carefully curated range of distributed products, all under one roof. More than that, they back it up with real integrator-first support, from system design to installation and well beyond handover. They're focused on helping you deliver smarter, more reliable projects, because when you win, they win. If you want to learn more, give the team a call on 1800 990 548. We're also supported by Sonance, the benchmark in architectural audio. If you're working in spaces where design matters just as much as performance, Sonance makes it possible to deliver incredible sound without compromising the aesthetic. From discrete, small aperture speakers that disappear into timber ceilings to completely invisible solutions, they give you the tools to satisfy both the client and the designer. Sonance is available exclusively in Australia through Amber Technology. Now, if you're looking for serious design firepower behind your next project, let me introduce you to Colosseum. Colosseum is a white label design and documentation partner built specifically for integrators, specialising in cinema and media room design, lighting control, and automation engineering. And their new Spark program is a big deal. If your vendor is Spark enabled, you can unlock Colosseum designed cinemas at nearly half the usual cost. Lower upfront investment, immersive 3D walkthroughs, faster sales conversations. Colosseum really is the design and documentation wingman you didn't know you needed. And finally, if you're looking to sharpen your skills this year, Cedia has just announced a new slate of online education programs for Australia and New Zealand. First up, starting April 24, is the inaugural Australia and New Zealand focused CIT study group. This runs for 1 hour a week over 7 weeks and is designed to prepare you for the Cabling and Infrastructure Technician, or CIT, certification exam. It's a small, capped group of just 10 participants, mentored by David Meyer, Brendan Reid, Paul Wooler, and Michael Daly. Each week focuses on a specific certification domain in a structured, discussion-based format. Your ticket includes the full study program, a copy of the CIT textbook, and an exam voucher. If you've been thinking about certification, this is a structured way to actually get it done. Then on April 29th, Advanced Rack Building goes virtual. Originally launched at the 2025 Tech Summit, this course will be led by Michael Daly from Wired by MJD and Stuart Robertson from Sound Living. This is not entry level. It moves well beyond the basics, covering rack design, power and heat calculations, cable scheduling, documentation, on versus off-site builds, cable management best practice, and long-term maintenance strategies. It's detailed and built for real-world integration projects. You can register for both programs at cedia.org. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Master Integrator, the podcast that looks beyond the install and into what makes integration businesses actually work. I'm your host, Paul Skelton. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to the partners who support Master Integrator and the wider industry. ADI Global, formerly Snap One, Amber Technology, Colosseum, Connected Magazine, and Cedia. Now, I want to start with a familiar scenario. An integrator tells me they pride themselves on service. They answer the phone after hours, they remote in on weekends, they look after their clients. But when I ask how service fits into their business model, how it's priced, documented, and resourced, there's often an awkward pause. Service is happening, but it's informal or reactive or unpaid. Today's guest has built a career proving that aftercare doesn't have to be chaotic, and that it can be one of the strongest, most stable parts of an integration business. Her name is Sarah Bradsell, and she's the Aftercare Manager at SMC over in the UK. Sarah leads a dedicated aftercare operation focused on proactive service, structured maintenance, and long-term client relationships. This conversation is about boundaries, systems, mindset, and why service done properly benefits clients and the integrator. This is Master Integrator. Here's Sarah Bradsell. Welcome to the show. For listeners who might not be familiar with you, can you let's start with a bit about who you are, where you're from, and kind of your role in the industry.
Yeah. Well, firstly, Paul, thank you for having me as well. I've been kind of listening back to a few episodes and, some really interesting stuff and cool people that you've had on previously. So it's pretty exciting for me to be here. I'm Sarah Bradsell and I manage the Aftercare department at SMC. I started on the reception desk back in April 2015. And yeah, basically just blagged my way in. Didn't know anything about the industry. A little bit of a nerd, I like my sci-fi and gaming, so I have an interest in technology, but really had no idea about the world of home technology, integration, etc. But yeah, I think within the first kind of even couple of months at SMC, I really was excited by what we were doing here and wanted to learn more. And when a opportunity became available in the aftercare team, I jumped at it. So nearly 11 years later, I'm now managing the department. We've got a team of 12 dedicated aftercare personnel, hundreds of SLA contracts, 24/7 on site and remote support. So yeah, it's really kind of snowballed in the time that I've been at SMC, and been doing some really cool things.
That seems like a very, very big team for aftercare. So I guess, what does an aftercare manager actually do on a day-to-day basis? Because a lot of people listening to this, they're small businesses. They wouldn't even have considered aftercare at all, let alone have an aftercare department.
Yeah, for sure. In all honesty, it's kind of herding cats daily. It's carnage. It doesn't matter how well structured and planned your department is. Aftercare is so reactive. Things are changing constantly. So my job is to make sure that all the moving parts are moving in the right direction. Whether that's, taking an engineer off one job to prioritize another job, or, making sure that the guys on the team are up to date with the invoicing, or, our debt chasing, making sure that we're hitting our SLA targets, booking all the maintenance checks in on time. There's so many different aspects to the daily life of aftercare. So yeah, it's basically just being super organized and on the ball at all times.
So obviously, aftercare, it is still a very foreign concept, like I mentioned to a lot of the people listening, or they've heard about it but probably just don't think it applies to them. So now that you've been in the role for a little bit and you've been in the industry for a little bit, why do you think aftercare, SLAs, service plans, maintenance contracts, all of that, why do you think that it's really not yet taken a foothold in the industry, and some people still see it as a bit of a dark art?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And to be honest, I'm a bit bamboozled by it myself, because it's just not really discussed. And I was actually lucky enough to be a part of the development of the first service and maintenance award for Cedia, which was kind of rolled out last year. And I think that's a big step in kind of getting people more engaged in the idea of ongoing support and kind of having those discussions around it. I mean, in our industry, there's a big focus on, for obvious reasons, technology, design, automation, etc., all the exciting, fun things, and then service is kind of an afterthought or forgotten about. Um, when we're looking at technology, I think, design and install, only 2/3 of that conversation. It should Aftercare should be a part of that. And then, yeah, why is that happening? I don't know. I think people are often put off by, the idea of having to invest time and money, which you do have to do. You really have to kind of take it seriously to be able to do it well. I think, other people have said as well over the years, you can't kind of do it half-assed. You've got to commit to it. So it's scary. It's scary to do, and it also just isn't glamorous. I've got a whole load of grey hairs I didn't have before, a whole load of wrinkles that just won't go away. So it's hard work, and it requires consistent effort to be able to do it well. But I think if you break that down, there's so many small steps that people can take, or just even changing their mindset, and taking some small steps to start delving into that world. You don't have to go straight to 24/7 support immediately, but just even thinking about, oh, could I sell this new client a contract? Could I build that into their final fit quite, or have a chat with them? Just thinking about it more and seeing where that would fit into their business. Yeah, more of a mindset change, I'd say.
So obviously, working with SMC, or I mean SMC itself, it is a globally known brand in our industry. In particular, people look up to it, they respect it, they're very aware of what your team is doing. So I'm realizing some people listening to this probably sit there and go, well, it's SMC, they've got all the resources in the world, all the money in the world, yada, yada, yada. In reality, it's still a business, and businesses don't have all the money in the world. So I'm wondering, from your experience then, was there a tipping point where, yourself, with Steve, that you sat down and said, okay, Aftercare, it needs to be something that we have fundamentally in our business model. This is what's happened. This is the opportunity ahead of us. I mean, how did you grapple with that concept and then implement it into the business?
Yeah, that's again a very good question. I think I've been quite lucky at SMC. I think, from day one, 30 odd years ago, the guys already understood the importance of aftercare, and had already started forming that very, very early on. We are also, I think, somewhat unique in the AV world that we manage intruder alarms as well, and there are very, very strict regulations with maintaining and monitoring intruder alarms. So, and you cannot have a monitored intruder alarm without maintaining it. And fundamentally, that's the way that we see all of the other systems we install. So we're thinking about it from a design and installation perspective all the way through to aftercare. We're the guys that are designing the systems are thinking, well, that's going to be a nightmare for Sarah's team if we put that camera up on the third story and then actually it needs a cherry picker to access it. Well, that's not really viable for a maintenance contract. It is doable, but is a client going to be willing to pay however much under their contract for us to get a cherry picker in each time? So I think it's just we've already kind of been thinking about it early on, and then again it's kind of snowballed. I think when I came in, we were at that tipping point. There was maybe 3 of us on the desk, a couple of engineers, and it was like, okay, now's the time to really grow this. What are we doing here? Okay, we need to overhaul our ticketing system. Let's really start thinking about proactive over reactive, and kind of changing my mindset about how we are operating. Before it was just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, trying to, forgetting about maintenance checks. We were, well behind on maintenance checks because we were just trying to scramble to book in reactive visits rather than seeing the bigger picture. We would do less reactive visits if we were doing our maintenance checks on time. So yeah, I think it's just been kind of continual investment in the department over the past 10 years that I've been here, and kind of taking it step by step to grow. But going back to your original question, I think for people starting up, a lot of companies, and I've worked at other AV companies. I took a small hiatus from SMC. We were on a break, and they won't let me forget it. But took a small hiatus and worked at a couple of other small AV companies, kind of either starting up their aftercare department or helping to grow it. So I've really seen aftercare from different perspectives of growth, and a lot of people are already doing the fundamentals of aftercare. How many people are picking up the phone out of hours? How many people are completing remote support? But then how many of them are getting paid to do that? They're doing it because it is part of all of our jobs, right? It's boring, but yeah, if a client's calling you at 10 p.m., then you pick up the phone. But if you had a maintenance contract in place, all of those costs are covered. Like, those conversations have already happened, those boundaries have been set, the client knows what the crack is. I think there's ways of doing it that are really beneficial and helpful to business and clients.
So you've touched on a few things there that I want to kind of circle back to, but
yeah, sorry, I've
no, that's
I
a
could
good
talk all
thing.
damn conscious. It's just internal monologue that's going on in my head right now.
No, that's right. It's foreshadowing where this is going to go. You're talking there about the shift from reactive to proactive mindset. So I'm wondering, what does that look like in real terms? Is it a checklist that all of your technicians have when they're installing things on site, or obviously there is a shift in mindset, but how do you make sure that's then spread out to the entire team and that they're all thinking about things in the same way?
Yeah. Well, I think from a kind of management perspective, and I think COVID had a lot to do with this as well. Before it was kind of, as I said, just going to fix things and not thinking about the bigger picture. And then with the limitations of COVID, not being able to access people's properties or, relying solely on our remote capabilities, it became apparent very quickly that we needed to really start focusing on remote support and, a remote access over kind of just sending an engineer out. So getting the team to understand, getting the whole company to understand from point of install, we should be speccing PDUs, remote PCs, whatever it may be, to ensure that we've got, even if the client doesn't end up signing up to a contract, we've still got the equipment in there available to us. If they did call us up and we needed to do pay-as-you-go support, we can log into the system, or we can get into the router as a minimum. The IP dock is up to date. All the stuff around kind of the remote access and remote capabilities that allows us to support the systems more efficiently. And then again, that combined with proactive maintenance checks. So the engineers going around, we've got kind of Excel documents that are for internal use only, where there is a checklist of every single room, and the engineers will go through, making sure every button is tested, firmware is updated, cameras are cleaned, anything that you can think of to ensure that the system's up to date, they're working the way they should, the rack's been dusted. To again to kind of reduce the need for on-site reactive support at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
Let's pause for a moment and hear from our partners. Connected is your go-to publication for the commercial and residential AV and smart home industry. If you missed the AETM conference in late 2025, or you were there and want a clear, considered wrap-up, the latest edition distills the standout sessions, recurring themes, and big ideas shaping where the industry is heading. From technology shifts and system design thinking through to business strategy, it's all unpacked in one place. You'll find the full wrap-up in the current edition of Connected, along with ongoing industry news online. The links are in this episode's description. And while we're talking about value, CEDIA has just launched the new Integrator Advantage program for members in Australia and New Zealand. This initiative was built around the simple question integrators often ask: what's in it for me? The Integrator Advantage program focuses on delivering tangible commercial benefits, exclusive member-only incentives and discounts from leading industry partners designed to help offset costs, strengthen business foundations, and sharpen technical capability. It sits along CEDIA's broader work in advocacy, workforce development, certification, and education. But the emphasis here is immediate, measurable return. If you're a current member, it's worth taking a look, and if you're not, this might just be what you're looking for. You can find out more at cedia.org. Now, let's get back to the episode. So why do you think it is then that so many small operators do kind of get stuck in that reactive mindset? And I guess it's probably a good thing that you have worked with a few different AV integrators, because it's not going to look like we're slagging one off in particular. But I guess, yeah, so from what you've seen, is there common personality traits or thought processes involved with the people who do get stuck in that reactive mindset that you just sit there and go, okay, well, there's the sticking point that we really need to address?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think finding the right people within your company to do the work is difficult, and to get them on board with what you're trying to do. I think even now at SMC, there's still a little bit of pushback sometimes when I ask for additional resource or specialist resource from the wide engineering team. It's still projects are our main focus, and actually trying to remind people that no, my department is as equally as important as everyone else's. Because again, it is like, well, it's aftercare. It's like they can do without it. It's like, well, no, we can't. We're working to really, really strict deadlines as well. So yeah, finding the right people and getting the right mindset, and then the financial investment, and really organizing yourself properly. I think there's a tendency to, and I've done it myself, oversell and overpromise at the start, trying to sign up as many contracts as possible, but then you don't have the resource to actually, feed back into those contracts. It is a bit chicken and egg at the start. You want to be able to have enough contracts and enough money to keep pushing, but you don't want to oversell. So it is really, really tricky. I think, that the pitfalls of trying to take engineers from the main projects engineering team when they're not client facing, often not willing to do written reports. So yeah, I think the kind of admin side of things is a difficult aspect of what we do, and especially at the beginning, finding the right ticketing system, or even if you're running off Excel spreadsheets, making sure they're updated, having somebody dedicated to doing that when everyone is already very, very busy. It's tricky.
So you mentioned there the investment of trying to get a program up and running, and I know that would definitely put a lot of small businesses off the idea. To counter that, though, are there potential hidden costs associated with staying in that reactive mindset that yes, there's an initial investment, but really the return on investment's there, and it would actually end up costing more if they don't have that program in place?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, hidden costs, no. I think if you're, I always try and be as honest as possible with our clients. You know, all of our contracts are tailored to their needs, and if we get it right, which we do most of the time, we should be hitting decent margins, and they should be happy. I think if there are loads of yeah, if you want to spend like we did a whole load of money and a whole load of time on a ticketing system early on, great, it's worked out for us later down the line, but that is a big chunk of money to be investing at the start. I think there's a lot of kind of free or very cheap ticketing systems that you can use that can really boost or reduce unnecessary admin. Um, but yeah, I think, just kind of organizing yourself in the right way, changing your mindset, getting people on board with it. There shouldn't be massive outlays at the beginning. If you sign up a couple of contracts, you're not overselling, so you're offering maybe a 2-day response time. So, we'll be on site within 2 days, or we'll log in remotely within 1 day. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to meet those deadlines, as long as you're organized correctly.
So I guess the next thing that I wanted to talk about is something that you touched on before about setting up an aftercare plan or a service plan, especially as a small integration company. If you're going to go to all the trouble of setting it up, obviously you need to set up something that people will want to buy. So I guess from your experience, are there key factors that should be in one of these plans that helps to make it more appealing to the end user? And are there things that really should be, I guess, core components, almost mandatory inclusions that really shouldn't be up for discussion?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think the majority of clients, want some sort of ongoing support. The general feedback is, what are you offering? What can I buy? I know, that sometimes it's a bit more of a difficult sell. They don't want to spend a whole load of money after they've already spent millions. But there is a kind of demand for this type of service. So I think the main part of it is educating the clients and understanding their requirements. So again, not overselling. If I know the client is out of residence, 8 months, a year, or they're gonna be here during the summer and over Christmas. So okay, fine. I'm not gonna then sell them weekly maintenance checks because that's stupid. I'm gonna look at kind of building the contract around maybe a couple of pre-residency visits, and then some reactive support when they need it. But it should be really tailored. I think before I was kind of looking at it was finger in the air, or another one is just kind of a percentage of the overall cost of the job. And I think if you're going about it like that, it's not going to be helpful to the client. There's in terms of how or things I always keep in the contract, I will always have proactive maintenance checks. And again, that really varies. As I said, some of our clients have weekly maintenance checks, which is pretty wild. Most people have biannual maintenance checks, but these guys want it every week. So that's what I get. And And then reactive support, so an allocation of time, or an amount of visits. Remote monitoring, which again actually is an easy win for smaller companies. There's a lot of remote monitoring devices out there now that are really cheap, really easy to set up. There's kind of no excuse to not be installing them. The monthly costs are minimal, and it's really, really useful. For us, we've got bespoke monitoring package that links directly to our ticketing system. So if there are any issues, an access point in bedroom 4 drops offline, that alert immediately goes into our ticketing system. It's triaged through to our networks department. They pick it up. With our remote capabilities on site, they can log in. If it's PoE, remotely reboot it, before the client's even aware that there's an issue. So, that's kind of ultimate end goal, is being able to fix things before our clients are even aware. So yeah, I think, proactive support, reactive support, remote monitoring, and service level agreed response times. So being able, again, a massive selling point to our clients is that we can be there within 4 hours on site if there's an emergency. We can log in within an hour. That's really useful to them. It gives them peace of mind that, if the whole house was to fail, the whole lighting system's down, well, somebody's going to be out within 4 hours with a replacement module or process, whatever it is. Yeah. Have I answered? I feel like I've gone off.
No, you've answered the question. So, I mean, you mentioned there, obviously, you do have a very almost customized approach to each job of what each client, it's tailored to their needs. I know a lot of people listening to this would probably be quite a big fan of the templated approach, of kind of having that mindset of if they can offer a one-size-fits-all service plan, then that's what they want to do. In your experience, is there room for that mindset or that approach, or does that just not work?
It's difficult. I think at the start, it's the easy way of doing it, right? And I get that because I've done that. But I think that's when you're 6 months into the contract, they've used up all of their hours, and then you're at zero profit margin, and you've then got to go back to the client and say, oh yeah, sorry, can you pay us an extra $4,000 to finish off the contract because we haven't priced it correctly, or we've underestimated. You can look at it the other way where, okay, you massively overprice it, and on, fingers crossed, you come out the end, you've got a good margin, great, but that's more difficult to sell to the client. I think the more nuanced approach has worked better for me over the years. That being said, it can work. Yeah, it can work. If you're just selling kind of, set SLAs, set amount of maintenance checks, that's it. I can't see why that would be a problem, but I think I'm just a bit more cautious maybe from past experience.
So I'm wondering, obviously, I mean, a lot of people in our industry, they're not salespeople. They prefer to be behind the scenes. Sales is an unnecessary evil to a lot of these people. Have you discovered a way that it is almost easy to sell a service plan, or are there, I guess, key points that your team has focused on that's kind of helped get them over the line to help the end users see that this is actually necessary and not just an additional cost?
Yeah, I mean, I would also like to say that I'm absolutely not a saleswoman. So I've had to kind of learn to do that part of the role, and it is quite a big part of what we do. And I'm sure we'll come back to this later, but even with the other kind of revenue streams that come from maintenance, such as upgrades or additional works, all of that kind of has a sales element to it, which I'm not great at. I am relying on the sales team at SMC and the upgrades guys and the PMs to help me with that. In terms of selling to the client, I think I'm a lot better at that now just because I understand it more. I understand what I'm selling and why I'm selling it. And I think, being passionate about it as well. And again, going back to kind of educating the clients. I think one thing that really, really stuck with me was Steve Moore early on in my career had said, you know, think about it this way: you wouldn't buy a Bugatti Veyron and then never ever have it serviced or MOT'd, right? It's peak technology. It's one of the best cars you could buy at the time on the market, and you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't just never have it looked at by a mechanic. So why, we're installing millions of pounds worth of technology in people's homes. Why would we then just walk away from that? And I think understanding, even the security aspects of it from a network perspective, making sure that you're doing firmware updates and, you could install the most expensive camera on the market, but if it's covered in cobwebs and there's a break-in, then it's not going to function the way the client wants it to or we want it to. So explaining all of that to the client, often, once they understand it, they're happy to pay for it, and then we can talk about, well, actually, okay, they're not that interested in super fast SLAs, but they are really, really keen to have, a couple of maintenance checks a year. Fine, let's build that into the contract, and tailor it to their requirements.
I guess another part of being able to sell these, service agreements comes down to how it's actually priced. So I'm guessing, how have you gone about actually pricing a service plan without, making it offensively expensive and unappealing that way, but also to make sure that you've covered your costs?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I kind of follow the proactive, reactive, remote monitoring, SLA kind of plan. So how much time am I allocating to each of those things, or how, if they are wanting 4-hour 24/7 response, then there is a markup to be able to receive that service. And then if they are wanting weekly maintenance checks, that's a day on site for a guy every week, then building that into my pricing tool. Again, thinking about what kind of technology is installed and what are the client's needs. Okay, they're based at home and really, really reliant on the network. Well, I want to make sure that, we're doing regular maintenance checks on network, or we've got, full fat monitoring on all of that to make sure that, it's operating in the right way. And if it's not, we're on it immediately. So again, just kind of tailoring, really thinking about what the client wants and not necessarily overselling.
Okay, so I guess just before too, you mentioned the unexpected benefits of putting a service plan in place when we're talking about recurring revenue and things like that. So what are they, and I guess how do these plans essentially alter the financial health of an integration business?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. I think firstly, it's easy to get kind of trapped in the snagging period on jobs, and then you just get stuck and you can never walk away from it because it's one thing after another. So actually, we often use maintenance contracts, kind of mop that up and carry on into the service contract. So, I'll be selling 18-month contracts up front and they get 6 months for free, basically. So they're paying for 12, but they get 18 months of cover with our SLAs, and we can kind of, mop up anything that's outstanding at that point and make sure we're immediately working to the SLAs. And I think that really kind of curries favour with the clients, being able to go straight into aftercare. They get to know the team, they get to know our processes, they understand what they're paying for immediately. And equally, they're receiving response times on issues. You can often or I found, kind of lose relationships at the end of projects because that's the bit where, it all gets a bit tense, everyone's a bit aggy, and actually being able to do that in a really structured, cohesive way often works out well for us. In terms of kind of revenue, there are so many different pathways that kind of spread out from aftercare. The RMR is a big factor, obviously, in what we do, but I think just having continued conversations with clients and having those relationships, the way I see it is, over the space of 10 years, how much money have we made off this one client? Well, okay, they recommended us to their brother, or, they have another property in Spain that we're working on, or, we actually upgraded their Lutron system, which was 8 years old. Or, even on a very basic level, being in these clients' properties, twice a year more, doing maintenance checks is a really easy way to survey for upgrades at the same time. Something as simple as us going in and seeing that there's a newer version of Apple TV out and they've got 20 Apple TVs in the house. Well, okay, on the report form, the engineers put, that would recommend upgrading Apple TVs. That then leads to, a wider discussion. Okay, it was 10 grand or something to upgrade them all, but what about everything else? Is there anything else that we could be doing? So there's so many different pipelines that come out of just having the maintenance contracts in the first place and having those relationships with our clients.
So aside from obviously trying to create a service plan product that's appealing to your client, there would obviously be processes that you need to take into account within your own business before launching one of these programs. So I guess, what should an integrator do when they are setting up a plan to make sure that they can sell it without burning out their staff or taking on too much work and going overload, or potentially overcapitalizing on what they're actually doing? So what should they take into account first before they actually roll out a plan?
Yeah, I think it's that kind of structure in place, and again, not overselling. So I would, it's difficult because it's the chicken and egg again, right? But I think there needs to be an allowance of engineering time available, and really, no excuses. If a maintenance client has called, an engineer, a dedicated engineer, needs to leave whatever he's doing and go and do that. You lose, or the clients lose faith very quickly in what you're doing, and the rest of the company will, if it's not taken seriously. So I think ensuring that there are people dedicated to aftercare, it might not be their full-time job at the start, but they need to know that they are a part of it and they are expected to be working for Aftercare. And I think just making sure things are being tracked correctly. The admin side, as I said, is a big part of what we do. I need to be able to tell our clients what we've done on site. What are they paying for? Okay, we've been out and done this whole maintenance check, but the engineer's not bothered to do his report. So actually, to the client, it looks like we've done nothing. So making sure that the engineers are feeding back, and that any additional works that are required are followed up on. Because again, I think at the start, it is kind of reactive. You're trying to, I don't know, fix issues rather than kind of seeing the bigger picture, and often everything else gets forgotten about. So structuring it and making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page.
I guess if we're talking very early on in processes to make sure that aftercare is factored in, to bring up one of the favourite topics that I love talking about, and that's documentation. So I'm wondering, what role does documentation play in all of this? Because I think we all know, well, I hope we all know, as an industry, that collectively it's not something we do particularly well. There are some people who are fantastic, but they're the exception, not the rule. So how would documentation help from an aftercare perspective? And are there things that need to be factored into the documentation that will ultimately make aftercare easier?
Yeah, we're very reliant on the project IP docs, and it is a problem even, at SMC. Works get done, the IP doc's not updated, we go to site, we've got the wrong information. So documentation is so important in what we do. And again, it's a whole company mindset. One person being a little bit lazy has a knock-on effect all the way through to us. So yeah, I think drawings are pretty standard, but kind of any IP documentation is super important. And just again, general written reports, communication is really key to what we do. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah,
It's a difficult one.
Yeah, and I think it's also similar to, I mean, integrators aren't always the best at selling documentation either, because it's not necessarily a tangible asset. They sell a theatre, people go in and here's my theatre. You talk about selling documentations, and a lot of homeowners just kind of look at you thinking, why would I want that?
Yeah, right. It's interesting. From an aftercare perspective, as I said, for the maintenance checks, we create our own comprehensive maintenance documents, which are completed during each maintenance check. All the information is kept within our ticketing system as well, of every single visit we've done that we can look back on. We daily chase engineer reports to make sure that they've been done. Our aim is to do the job and report back to the client same day, and invoice if needed. So there are kind of strict processes in place from our side to ensure that the client understands what they're paying for, or they're getting the feedback from us.
Do you think SMC would have had the longevity that it's had, or become the company that it is today, if aftercare wasn't a separate department and something that's factored into the jobs?
Oh, I think that, I don't know, it would be a different beast, I think. It has kind of become the backbone of what we do, and it wins us jobs. It been able to say that we do 24/7 support it's pretty impressive. And we've got a bespoke monitoring system. There's so many things that we do in aftercare that gets us jobs in the long run. It's part of our sales pitch at the start. Yeah, I mean, SMC would be different for sure if aftercare wasn't here. It has become a really big part of what we do, and I think everyone is kind of really on board with it. As well, as I said, Stephen was a pretty forward-thinking guy. He was already 30 years ago championing aftercare, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that. From 2015 to now, just the way that the department has changed is pretty wild. We've continually been investing. I've just hired, a second in command for me a couple of weeks ago. So there is still, we don't want to kind of sit back now. We still want to keep pushing forward. What can we do next? How far can we go with this?
Do you want to see the industry get to a point where having the ability to say aftercare is a point of difference is almost obsolete in itself, that it should just be a given? It's more of an expectation than a marketing tool?
Yeah, I mean, I can't see any reason why that wouldn't happen. I think it's already kind of organically happening. People are definitely, in the past even couple of years, more people are talking about it. There's a aftercare award at CEDIA now, which is, it's awesome. So yeah, I think, that's the goal, right? For it to be the norm. And I can't see any reason why it won't be. As I said, companies are already doing this. They don't even know it. They're providing SLAs when they're picking up calls out of hours or responding to a client within a couple of hours. They are meeting SLAs that they've put on themselves. They're just not selling that to the client. And then it becomes an expectation of the client that anytime they call, the phone's going to be picked up. But you've set a precedent and it's difficult to get out of. So kind of setting those boundaries at the start, I think, once people start doing that, I think it's really, you're going to see a change in the industry.
So if an integrator is listening to this and they've just made the decision that they want to start building out a service plan.
I've been that persuasive, have
That's
I?
it. They've gotten to the end and went, yes, absolutely, that's my next step. So where do they start? What's the first thing that they should be doing after this to say, okay, that's the practical foundation of me setting up a service plan?
Yeah, I think, have a chat with your team, get them on board with it. Reach out to your clients. Are there any particular clients that would be easy to sell to? See if they're interested. Start trying to put a pricing tool together. There are small steps. Just having those conversations, and kind of getting the ball taking those first steps, getting the ball rolling on it, getting the people around you invested in it. And then trying it out, sell a couple of contracts, see what happens. You might not make a massive margin in the first year, but what about 10 years later? Seeing the bigger picture and taking those first steps.
Is there a bad first step that they could do? Is there something that could ultimately ruin them or put them a few steps behind?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not easy, right? It's you're going to make mistakes. I've made plenty. I'm still making mistakes now. I'm still learning. I don't think there's anything drastic. It's if you're really worried, even just like a kind of monthly rolling contract. If you're scared about looking into a 12-month contract, maybe offer a monthly rolling contract, see how you get on, a bit of remote support time, or something that you can sell to a client and say, if there's an issue, we'll log in within 4 hours, and you get a couple of hours a month remote support, and it's not much, but it's something. Test the water. If it goes well, great. Bump it up a bit. Add in a couple of maintenance checks or whatever it may be. Just to get started.
It sounds like the best step forward is almost just to try something, try anything, and the worst thing you do is nothing.
I would say so. I mean, you don't really have anything to lose, it's the clients. It is helpful to the clients, and it's helpful to business. So it's a win-win.
Thanks to Sarah for sharing what it actually takes to make aftercare work in the real world. If this episode resonated, it's probably because you're already doing more service than you realise. The difference is whether it's intentional or just expected. Aftercare done well protects your clients, your team, and your business. It reduces stress, it creates recurring revenue, and it turns support from a liability into an asset. Now, you don't need to overhaul everything overnight, but you do need to start treating service as part of your professional offering, not a favour. A huge thank you to the partners who support Master Integrator and the industry: ADI Global, Amber Technology, Colosseum, Connected Magazine, and Cedia. Be sure to support the companies that support you. If you'd like to get in touch, email me at info@masterintegrator.com.au or find me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening to Master Integrator. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time. Hi folks, Paul here, just with a quick update. The response so far to the podcast has been overwhelming, and as a result, Master Integrator is growing. So now we're inviting the global community to help shape what comes next. What began in Australia is evolving into a shared editorial podcast platform built around real voices from real markets. As a result, we're now looking for volunteer co-hosts outside of Australia, including those based in Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Europe, and Canada. Wherever the smart home technology industry is growing and needs a platform to tell its stories. Now, this isn't necessarily about building a personal profile. It's about representing your local community, sharing practical, lived experience, and helping connect integrators across borders. If you care about the future of this industry and want to contribute, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at info@masterintegrator.com.au. Thanks again for your support.